Hi, everyone, and good afternoon, good evening. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to introduce Sally again. And as Steve said already, she's already a very well-known presenter in Sub-Saharan Africa and on the global stage as well, Sally, which is great. She's a Nigerian educator with 20 years of teaching experience since she graduated. She's working at the moment as a teacher and a trainer and an administrator and a copy editor. Very busy lady. And she believes in teaching effectively rather than just teaching hard. Very important, I think that is. 20 years in education and 14 years training other teachers. At the moment, she's the head of the education unit at a private college of education. And she also holds leadership positions in ELTAN, the teacher association in Nigeria, one of the teaching associations in Nigeria. She loves teaching literature, and she's recently started writing her own poems and short stories and drama. I'd love to see some of them sometime, Sally. She's presented 2 webinars and participated as a co-presenter at the World Teachers' Day and the Global website in 2024 in the webinar series. So Sally's committed to helping teachers discover smarter, more effective ways to reach their students, including using their first languages. And she's going to present on that now. So over to you, Sally.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. Today we'll be talking about the use of strategically using L1 in our ELT classes. Before we go on to the objectives for today's webinar, I'd like to find out, how many languages do you speak? Would you like to put that in the chat? And if possible, could you give us your first language? Would like to see some of these in the chat, please. I have a gala here. Someone says they speak 4. Wow, 3, 4, Creole, Bambara, Wolof. Wow, that's interesting. Thank you very much. Oh, I see Igbo as well. Great. Igbo, English, Yoruba. That's interesting. Okay, thank you very much. You can keep it coming. By the end of this webinar, we'll be able to apply James Cummings' linguistic interdependence theory to support strategic L1 use in our ELT classrooms. We would also be able to implement specific techniques using regional lingua francas like Nigerian Pidgin, Swahili, or any other regional languages. We would also be able to design activities that build both English proficiency and cultural competence. And then would learn how to maintain effective balance between English and shared languages in our classroom. Next slide, please. Okay, so we would start by talking about James Cummings. James Cummings is a well-known psychologist, and in 1989, he propounded this theory of linguistic interdependence. And it became a revolutionary theory for how we think about multilingual education. The core principle of this theory is that languages in a multilingual person's mind are not separate containers. They are rather interconnected systems that support each other. You can look at it like putting together all the languages into one compartment in our brain rather than separating each of them into different compartments of the brain. The key concept of this principle is that its skills and knowledge developed in one language are able to transfer to other languages. Although vocabulary and grammar differ from language to language, thinking skills, cultural knowledge, and learning strategies are transferable. And then students need strong foundation in L1 to develop a strong L2. Why does this all matter? I'm sure that many of us who are bilingual, multilingual, we already are familiar with some of these points. Why do you think this matters? Would you like to share with us in the chat, please? Hmm. My first language is Hausa. I speak two languages. Great. I speak three: English, Magi, and Hausa. I speak Hausa and English, and I'm now learning French. Sorry, I'm now learning a third one, that is French. Beautiful. Our languages are a very important part of our identity. I agree with you. Since childhood, as from 3 years, more exposure, more input of mother tongue. I speak three languages: Amharic, Afan, and Oromo. Okay, that's interesting. So, why do you think all of these are important? Skills and knowledge being able to transfer from one language to another. Can we see the next slide, please? Thank you. Why this matters? Number one is the cognitive advantage it provides. Another reason is the cultural competence. I'd like to talk about the cognitive advantages this Cummings theory has on people who are multilingual. Um, People who have more than one language, people who are able to speak more than one language, have this advantage of being able to think clearer, think better. Something I read, which I would like to share with us, says, sorry, okay, anyway, but let's take cultural competence. I'll find the quote. Um, cultural competence is cultural competence reinforces students' cultural identity, which is very important. It provides them with a sense of security and validates their lived experiences, kind of like providing a cultural context for them to understand new concepts and facilitating communication and connection with their heritage. What about metalinguistic awareness? What does that mean? Metalinguistic awareness is the ability to reflect and analyze language as an object of study rather than just a tool for communication. It enables learners to understand the nuances or rudiments of language and be able to adapt to different linguistic contexts and convey their intended meaning. So, when a child understands more than one language, is able to think in one language and be able to transfer his thoughts or his views or his understanding into another language, thus helping him understand better than someone who has just or who understands just one language. Emotional support and anxiety reduction. Now, emotional support comes out as it provides a sense of belonging and understanding, which is very important to the emotional well being of every child. It also helps with resilience, particularly for individuals facing certain challenges. Now, I have this child. Um, I really didn't know him personally that much, but he was in one of my classes. He sent me a message on WhatsApp after he had left the school, and he said something. He said, Auntie, do you know why I like you? It's because you speak my language. And I didn't know he was not even from the rural area where I teach. He was just residing there with his mother. So that um, language helps children emotionally. It helps to support them, helps them relax in the class. Then there is being able to explain efficiently complex grammar explanation, complex grammar points. For example, I was teaching a set of students and I mentioned to be as an auxiliary verb. And when I asked them to break it down, we don't conjugate verbs in English the way we do in French. So when you say break it down, it seems like, what is she talking about? But these are adult learners. So I tried to help them to see that this verb to be is used in different forms. Can you give us examples of all the forms that this verb to be is used? It was difficult. So I said, okay, can someone tell me what he does? I picked a student and I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a photographer. I said, good. Can you tell me that? Can you make this same sentence in pidgin? And he said, I be photographer. So I said, okay, so what is the form of the verb to be you have used in the sentence you made? He said, am. And I said, so am is a form of the verb to be. And then the class went wild with giving me answers. Is, was, this, that. And I said, well, that's the point. So being able to explain grammar points or even any other vocabulary or difficult things to explain using L1 makes it a lot more easier. It also fosters inclusion in the classroom. What do we mean by inclusion? We know that recently there's been a lot of talk on making our classes inclusive. Now, um, if you limit children from using their mother tongue, or you ban them completely from being able to use their mother tongue, how does that foster inclusivity in our classroom? So that's one of the reasons why it is important that we use L1 in our classes. Now back to cognitive advantages. Multiple studies have shown that bilingual individuals excel in tasks that require problem solving, creativity, and pattern recognition. The constant practice of switching between languages enhances cognitive flexibility, making it easier to approach problems from different angles and develop innovative solutions. Studies have also shown that bilingual people better understand maths concepts and word problems when compared to their non-bilingual peers. So that's one of the advantages, or that is why it matters to use L1. It also improves memory and the ability to multitask. All of these functions that are cognitive. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we want to look at these 4 points. Are they true or are they false? Kindly give us your views. So simply type A, false, or true, depending on your view on these points. L1 use creates dependence. B, L1 use in class confuses students. C, parents expect English only in English classes. And D, L1 reduces English exposure time. Okay. Um, Someone says true, true. Are you referring to one to A or B? So could you please say number A, true, B, false, as the case may be? Okay. So I can see A, true, B, true, A, okay, C, true, A, false, B, false, C, false, D, true. Okay. A, true, D is true, 3 false, 2 true, 1 true. A true. Okay. Thank you very, very much. Now, I'd like to explain that all of these are myths. We're going to look at this in the next slide. Please, next slide. Thank you. Now, L1 use creates dependence. The reality, research has shown that the strategic use of L1 accelerates L2 development. An example, students who discuss complex topics in Hausa first write better English essays. Why? It's because they develop the ideas in their strongest language first, and then they transfer these linguistic resources into their um, L2. I don't know if you have noticed it. People who learn languages in a classroom seem to write better than those who kind of acquired the language in their environment. So if you use L1 in the class, it helps students to better understand concepts faster or better understand concepts than just using L1. We'll see how we can do this later on. Number two is also a myth. It confuses students. The reality is that students are natural code switchers. They are already managing multiple languages. For example, a student in Abuja might use English for school, Hausa for market, and Igbo for family. Now, we're simply transferring what this child is already doing into the classroom. We're simply making their natural multilingual skills visible and strategic. I think some of us do it. For instance, in my family, my mom speaks to you in Igbo, she expects you to respond in Igbo. And right in that same conversation, if there is a need to switch to Yoruba, she does that immediately, depending on the circumstances she finds herself. And all her children are expected to respond immediately. Because for her to have changed language, for her to have switched language, there is a reason for which she has done that. Let's go to next slide, please. Number three, that's C. It's also a myth. Parents expect English only. The reality is that parents want their children to be successful multilinguals. Communication strategy. When we explain L1, when we explain to them how L1 use builds stronger English skills, the parents are able to understand. We show the results of students with a strong L1 and how using this in the classroom has enhanced their use of English. And number four, which is D, is also a myth. It reduces English exposure time. Now, strategic L1 use, which is what we are advocating, or which is what I am advocating, makes English time more effective. Imagine that you have spent 10 minutes trying to explain a particular concept to students in English. Sometimes you dramatize, trying to help them to understand the meaning of what you're saying. You demonstrate, you describe, and still they are unable to get it. But in just 2 minutes, you're able to use their L1 if you understand it, or perhaps a regional language to give them a clue as to what that means or explain that concept. You see their eyes light up. You see that they have understood what you are saying. So 5 minutes of meaningful English discussion after L1 scaffolding beats 30 minutes of confused silence. Of confused silence. Can you add one more myth or one more benefit of using L1 or RL? Would like to see some of your opinions in the chat. Okay. Have you come across any myths like this? Or have you noticed any other benefit? Okay, thank you. It promotes integrated learning. Thank you very much. Um, okay, I'll take the questions at the end, please. Okay. Learners process concepts faster in L1. I agree. Okay. If L1 is allowed in the classroom, the students are more expressive. That's very true. Okay. Use of L1 better contextualize the lesson, enhances to teach vocabulary in context, okay, makes learning more impactful and relatable. I agree. L1 in class is retrogressive. Okay. Yes, that's one myth. Learners like to learn in L1. Yes, but we're teaching them English, so they cannot learn in L1. Okay, L1 can help us to translate difficult vocabulary and to give difficult instructions. Thank you very much. L1 sets a stress-free atmosphere in the classroom. Thank you. L1 uses lowers anxiety and builds confidence. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, this is an illustration. On the picture to your left, you find a building with scaffolds and people walking. The picture on the right is a complete building, a very beautiful structure. Now, would you agree that the building on the right had at one point been like the building on the left? Now, for us to be able to achieve what we have in the second picture, we need these scaffolds to be able to get there. So that is what using L1 and ROLs do for us as language teachers. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. When should L1 or ROL be used? When should L1 or RL be used? I've listed some of the points or some times or at what point in our lesson we can use L1. I know you may have used them at different points too. So I'd like you to look at what we have and also share with us at what points you have used them, which ones you agree with, and which ones you would like to try. I've listed concept introduction, comprehension checks, phonetic scaffolding, cultural bridging, error analysis, emotional support, metacognitive reflection, complex instructions, vocabulary expansion, and cultural translation practice. The point here is, okay, yes, the scaffolds are necessary in erecting tall houses. Thank you. ADE to use L1, ADE. Thank you. I find error analysis with L1 can be very useful. Thank you very much. ADE, thank you. At the concept introduction, thank you. Emotional support, AE and H, thank you. All, wow, all can be possible. Concept introduction, vocabulary, translation, wow, thank you very much. Yes, um, depending on what you're trying to teach, depending on the topic you're teaching, depending on the level of your learners, depending on the context of your class, you can use this anytime. For instance, if you're introducing a concept, um, you might decide to do that using their L1. You know that there are some areas where they do not speak any other language than their mother tongue. In fact, there are some parts of Nigeria where they do not even speak the regional language, which is Pidgin, or maybe even Hausa or Yoruba in some cases. So at that point, what language do you use? What do you do? If you want to explain something, how do you go about it? Now, it's also good to use them when we're doing comprehension checks, when we're trying to understand, to see if they have understood, if we're trying to break down how to pronounce a word or why this word is pronounced this way, anything related to phonetics, we could bring this L1 or regional language use at that time. We could also use it to bridge culture. You know, some children For instance, in the state where I reside, it's like a a mini Nigeria, because people from all parts of the country reside in this state, and children from all of these backgrounds come to school in this place. For instance, the child I talked about earlier, he was living in a rural community in the riverine area, but this child is actually Yoruba. But I never knew that he's Yoruba until the day he chatted me up after he had left the school to say he likes it, that he heard me speaking Yoruba on the phone, and he liked me because of that, because I speak his language, and that's why he was paying attention to my classes. So all of these are things that help our learners. Like I have always said, I advocate for efficient teaching, something that makes teaching and learning a lot easier is what I go for, not something that makes it difficult. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, someone says depends on the topic. Um, Parents expect English only. Okay, we'll take the question later. Thank you. We'll ask it. Okay, thank you very much. So this is an example. When you're teaching conditional sentences, now I used Yoruba here. Tí mo bá ní owó, màá ra ọkọ̀. If I have money, I'll buy a car. Now, pattern recognition. Once you say tí mo bá lówó, the student grabs that if relationship in their L1, and they begin to give you other examples, you know, like the example I used to earlier when I was teaching um, auxiliary verbs, and I brought be to be as an example, and it was difficult for my learners to break down be to am, are, is, was, and so on. The minute I used pidgin, or I asked them to say the same sentence they had said in English in pidgin, it became very clear to them the relationship between be, am, is, are, and so on. So that helps students when we're trying to teach complex patterns or um, topics. Um, Result: student understands both the grammatical structure and the cultural context where conditionals are used. Another example: vocabulary. Analysis means say you dey break something small small to understand am well. Now, if you tell a child to analyze something, and the word analysis or analyze is difficult for the child, you can break it down in the regional language. And as soon as the child understands it, you give other examples. The student can now use terms like analyze, examine, evaluate with confidence. So the student applies this analytical thinking in both his L1 and his English context. Can you share other examples with us? Have you used any of this? Would you like to share your story and the results you got? Okay, some teachers may think that using mother tongue in English classroom mean translating English into one's mother tongue. I think it is not a matter of translation, but helping students to make the idea clear. For example, for difficult terms or vocabulary that you can't define easily in English, but easily in L1. Thank you very much. So using L1 in the class does not mean translating. Although sometimes you can translate to help them get what you're trying to do, but that depends on your learners. That depends on the level of learners that you do this with. Can we go to the next slide, please? Hmm. Now, we talked about James Cummings' theory, 1989 theory. Does that mean because it was propounded in 1989, it is no longer useful? No. Recent academic support by Nobahira Mohammed and Razwan Rashid gives us something that I'd like us to read. So I'll leave you a minute to quickly go through this. Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, what we advocate is flexibility. A multi theoretical approach works better than just one particular theory. So it's important that teachers understand their learners, understand their context, and try as many theories as possible that will work in their classroom. Next slide, please. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that if the learner has not learned, then teaching has not taken place. Our priority as teachers should be teaching in ways that ensure our students actually learn. This is a personal story. I learned French um, in the university. And then when I got in, we were 22. And the policy in the entire department was ici rien que le français. I mean, it was written on the walls all over. The lecturers come into the classroom and they speak French only. They demonstrate, they dramatize, they try to explain, but it was really difficult, especially for those of us who had no background whatsoever in French, except for maybe those of us who were fortunate to learn Bonjour, comment ça va in secondary school. Some others had no such opportunity, so it was difficult. Out of the 22 of us that we admitted into that program, only 4 of us graduated. 16 dropped out in the first year. The others dropped out before final year. So I think that while it is important to teach learners in the language that you want them to learn, I also consider how best to get these learners to get the concept or to understand the point you're trying to make, which is why I'm saying scaffolding. Look at your class, break down the concepts in smaller bits that help them understand. And as soon as they have understood, you switch back to the English language, and then you have been able to help them. I have this experience. I was teaching descriptive essay in a class of final year secondary school students. I'd explained the topic. In fact, I'd written the topic on the board and they told me, Auntie, we don't understand what this topic means. I tried to explain. I tried to use an example to help them understand. It was difficult. In fact, half of the class didn't understand. But that question was from the past question, one of the past questions that had been used for the senior secondary examination. And I was required to teach that. So, how do I get them to understand this topic first before being able to answer the question? I switched to Pidgin and explained it, and immediately the class just, in fact, they started writing. In fact, there is this girl that never submits assignments, never. I've tried, I've talked with her privately, no way. I didn't know she had a challenge understanding the English language. So when I used Pidgin that day, the following day, the girl came back with her assignment. I was surprised. I was like, you did your assignment? She said, yes. I said, why? How? She said, Auntie, when you used pidgin, I understood what you were explaining. And then I went home, I asked my sister, I explained everything to my sister, and my sister wrote it down for me. I was very happy that I'd been able to get her to do something. I'd been able to get her to participate in class and do an assignment. So from that day, I decided that each time I find it difficult to explain, or I explain something and it's difficult for them to understand, I would simply switch to a language that they would understand, explain that concept, and get on with my class. Thank you very much. Okay, so takeaway tips to try before our Telegram discussion on Friday. Now, this links, you can please, I think the links will be shared in the chat. The first one is an article from Mother Tongue to Other Languages. It shows the researches that have been carried out on how beneficial using mother tongue in a classroom can be. And then the second article talks about is inclusion in a multilingual classroom. And it talks about an experiment using L1 in class and the results of this experiment. I think it is something worth reading, and then we'll discuss some of the points here in our next in our discussion on Telegram. Thank you.
Thank, thank you so much, Sally. That was so interesting. And we had so many people commenting in the chat, answering the questions, doing the quizzes, the matching things. So everybody is really invested in this and really interested. We can tell. We've got some questions already that I'll ask you now. And if anyone has any other questions, please pop them in the chat. If we have any time afterwards, then we'll allow people to unmute. So, the first question was about one of your slides. Somebody asked, how can myth 3, the one about parents expecting English only, how can that enhance engagement and improve comprehension? What did you mean by that? Do you remember that slide?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Um, Slide 3 is about
Myth
parents
3.
wanting
Yeah.
parents wanting their children to learn only English. Now, the reality is that parents want their children to be successful. They want the best for their children. And I'm not sure there's any parent who wants his child to know only one language. Now, what's the use of knowing this mother tongue but not being able to use it to help your child understand a concept that will make it easier for him or her to do better in the English language? Like the illustration of the buildings, we need these scaffolds, we need these things. I don't think there's anyone building a house who would tell the builders to paint the building without climbing. I mean, like just stand on the ground and paint to the roof, or perhaps lay blocks, or even roof the house from the floor. It's not possible. So you need these scaffolds. You need this small use of mother tongue or regional languages at certain points to help the learners understand. I don't think if you use it well, strategically, like I'm saying, any parent will oppose that.
Okay, because they can see the results then, can't they? Which is the
Yeah.
point, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. There was one question about which language is preferable, L1 or L2? And that links to another question about balance. Now, how can you get the ideal balance in this? Is it 50-50 or 80-20? What do you think about that?
Okay. I wouldn't recommend any percentage. I would rather say you look at your learners. For instance, beginners would need a lot more use of L1 to be able to achieve the level of proficiency they require at that level. But when you get to intermediate learners, definitely they would have learned the L2 to a certain point. So you reduce the use of L1. For instance, if you are teaching vocabulary for L1, use, you could use pictures, to explain what you mean or to help them see what you're trying to tell them. But in a case where you cannot get pictures, you can strategically use the L1 or the regional language, and then they get that concept and you move on to your next point in the lesson. But by the time they get to intermediate level, you won't need some of these things anymore because they have a larger vocabulary and they'll be able to, describe what they have in mind to you rather than you doing all the explanation and the dramatization and the everything. So you look at your level of learners, you look at what they need at the particular time. That should help you decide how much of L1 or regional language to use in your class.
Yeah, so there's no fixed answer, is there? And we've
No,
got to
no.
keep maybe changing and seeing how it affects the learning because we only have a certain amount of time for the lessons. We can't keep using a lot more other language. We've got to see about the effect, haven't we? I think. Yeah, great. Okay, what do you think? There's one here, interesting question. Have you got any data or research that supports the long-term effectiveness of this approach in improving communicative competence? Have you come across any data or research?
Okay, I've read articles, and many of the articles suggest that the studies that have been carried out show that it is beneficial to use L1 strategically. Um, I think in India, the British Council carried out a research on translanguaging. Translanguaging is different from code switching. Translanguaging is spontaneous use of your L1 or regional language, whereas what we're talking about here is strategic code switching. So if the people there have found that translanguaging is effective for their children to be able to learn the English language, why not?
Okay, great. And with that, you've also answered the most recent question in the chat about code switching and code mixing, which is great as well. Two answers in one. Lovely. Um, the How can we, this is an interesting one. How can we explain a grammar rule in L1 if the grammatical structure of that language is different from English? Because the examples you gave, the structure was similar, wasn't it? Have you done it in languages where the language has a different structure?
Okay, well, the Pidgin English does not have the same structure with the English language. So I've done it in Pidgin. Currently, I don't use the language of the community where I teach, but Pidgin is understood by majority of them. So I use that as it applies. And then sometimes I ask my learners, how do you say this in your language? And they give me the term. In fact, sometimes they say, no, 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 that's not the one. It doesn't mean that, it means this, or this is how we say it in this language. And even though the structure is different, it works. You can tell them, for instance, let me try this. In French, we say je m'appelle, which literally means I am called. But we don't say that in English language. We say my name is. Yes, French does have my name is je me nomme, but if you say je m'appelle and you're trying to translate from that to English, you don't tell somebody um I am called, because the Englishman would like, what are you trying to say? Or better still, I am 10 years old. French would say I have 10 years. That's a different structure. So, but you're able to tell your learners that this is the structure, but this is what it means, and this is how you can apply it in the English language. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think that's clear. Yeah, it's about explaining the clear differences because you don't have to explain the similarities. You can explain what is different as well. I've used that in class as well with learners with the same language explaining to each other, and they can help each other even if you don't speak their language, which you've said that already, I think. Yeah, great. Now, this is a problem. What about in schools where using the L1 is not allowed? What do you suggest for that? Because that's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yes, that's a difficult one, but I think that school heads respect teachers who produce results. So you can give them your results, you can do your research, you can show this to your school head, and perhaps request for time to do this, and then they see the results themselves. If they see research, if they see the result of research that you have done, and you perhaps encourage them to try doing a little research on this, I think it will help to mitigate whatever challenges you might face with your school authorities.
Okay, so it is a difficult one, but you can show the results, show the success, and that might well, in the long term, change the policy, mightn't it? So this is the only reason which is going to make it work, isn't it? Which is great. Yeah, great. Yeah, what about which language do you choose? Now, if the students speak more than one language, or in the class there are three or four different regional languages or first languages, how do you make it fair and inclusive by including all the languages or each of them some of the time? What do you suggest?
Okay, sometimes it has to do with the languages that the teacher is conversant in, and at other times you can ask the learners, maybe the learners who speak the same language, you can group them together. Then the ones who, that similar languages, you group them together so they can help one another. I think that's one way to handle such situations. Then in another case too, you can ask them what they say in this language, and you ask them what they say in this other language, and then you can marry them. As long as you're able to help each the learners, you are encouraging inclusivity. You don't just limit it to one language.
Yeah, because you, the teacher, might only speak one of the languages, mightn't you? But again, if you give them a voice to their language and you get them in different first language groups, mainly, maybe, then at least you're valuing their languages and valuing their ability to share in the language
Yeah.
and help each other. It's great. Okay. One question was, could translation activities be systematically incorporated into lesson plans?
Well, translation activities, I don't know. It depends on your topic. It depends on what you are teaching. For instance, if you're teaching vocabulary, I don't think it's wrong to translate some of the words. Just like you can use pictures, you can bring in pictures into the classroom, you can bring in videos, you can demonstrate, you can dramatize. I don't think it is wrong to translate some of the words, or even ask your learners to give you the equivalent in their language. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and I think translation is another skill, isn't it? It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it strategically, then if you're doing it all the time, then that will become something expected, and maybe learners will use it as a crutch too much and not try to understand. So it might be better not to do it systematically, but to do it when you need it, as you need it, as the students, as you see the students need it. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. What what do you think are the external factors why teachers are encouraged to use L1 in their lessons? I'm not sure if I know what this question means. External factors. Is that about the community maybe, or the country, or world global languages? I'm not sure. Does that make sense to you, that question?
Mm-mm. No.
No. Okay, we'll leave that one then. And there was another question. Um, What strategies do you propose to help learners learn more vocabulary in English through their L1? So that was one of your items,
Okay.
wasn't it?
Through their L1,
Vocabulary learning.
they can look for words in their mother tongue and give the equivalent in English, or you give them words in English language and ask them to get the equivalent in their language. That's one way to learn vocabulary. Another way is to help them learn a new word each day. So if you learn maybe you pick your dictionary and you choose one word for that day. You can learn that and look for the equivalent in your language. That's another way. And maybe you can also, I think there's this dictionary that has a word of the day every day. So if you can get that for adult learners, if they have this in their phone, fine. Otherwise, you can look for sites where they do word of the day, idioms of the day, proverbs of the day, and that can improve your vocabulary. So when you learn this word in English, you look for what it means in your language. I think that's one way to build
It's
your
a great idea.
vocabulary.
And I agree with the comment in the chat that Sally is answering the questions very proficiently and effectively. That's great. There's an interesting question here. What kind of teacher training is needed to help educators use the first languages effectively?
Oh, is there really a special training that is needed? I don't know if there's a special training needed. I think it comes with time and practice.
Mhm.
Um,
I
developing
think it might be
yourself
a
for
good thing.
both
Might be
sides.
a good thing to incorporate into teacher training courses, though, because if teacher trainers are saying only use English, and then they get into the classroom and they realize they can and should use other ones, that's going to be difficult. So I
Yeah,
think the teacher trainers need to know this and just
yes,
incorporate it as a normal
part of learning.
strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, policy makers, it takes a long time to change the policy. So for us as teachers, I think we grow professionally. For instance, you have attended this webinar, so you know that this is something that is being advocated currently. And then if you want to try it, it will be great. Now for your school heads who may be opposed to policymakers, you can refer them to this webinar or to the research articles we have provided, and they read it for themselves and say, oh, this is what is applicable all over the world, and they may be less opposed to this.
Great idea, especially for using this webinar. I think we've got time just for a quick question. Tasali's got your hand up there. Do you have a quick question, Tasali? Do you want to unmute and ask the final question of the webinar?
Thank you very much, Linda and Salome. I'm very much interested to attend this webinar. But I have a concern that language one issue is controversial, still, particularly when we teach English. But it's interesting, but I have a concern on the assessment. I don't know whether this issue is raised because I joined you lately. For example, you use translation. And how do you will be confident on the result of the students, particularly when you assess? Do you
Okay,
use
so
that code
quick answer
to
then,
assess
Sally, on
them?
assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tasali.
Okay, I assess in English language. The basic or the reason for using L1 is to help you better your L2. So since I'm teaching English, I assess in English. I have helped the learners understand what is required of them. So I expect them to be able to put this in English. Now, if they are unable to put it in English, I know I didn't do my job well, which is why we do summative assessment rather than, sorry, we do formative assessment rather than just summative assessment. So at the end of each class, I try to find out how much of the lesson has been taken, how much of this they have learned. Now, when I assess and I see that they didn't really get it, so I do something else. I try another strategy. I give them an assignment. I
Yes, Salome's breaking up a
recommend
little bit there.
a
Yes, yes. I think this
video,
is true, isn't it? So you've got to learn what's happening as you go along and not leave it all till the
something
end.
that
Yeah.
to help them
Okay.
understand that lesson better. And then I come back